The U.S. and Canadian constitutions are foundational to their governments, sharing similarities, yet differing in structure, content, and interpretation. The U.S. Constitution, adopted in 1787, is a single written document that outlines the framework of the federal government, including the separation of powers amongst the legislative, executive, and judicial branches. It is relatively brief, consisting of 7 articles and 27 amendments. In contrast, Canada's Constitution is a series of documents, the most significant being the Constitution Act of 1867, once known as the British North American Act, and the Constitution Act of 1982, which includes the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. This multi-document approach reflects Canada's evolution from a British colony to a fully sovereign nation. The U.S. Constitution has a more rigid amendment process, requiring approval from 2/3 of both houses of Congress and ratification by 3/4 of the states. This high threshold makes amendments relatively rare. In Canada, the amending formula varies depending on the nature of the amendment. Most amendments require the approval of Parliament and 2/3 of the provinces, representing at least 50% of the population, allowing, at least in theory, for more flexibility in adapting to changing societal needs. Although, of course, it's not quite as simple as that, as 2 provinces, Ontario and Quebec, account for about 60% of the total population in Canada. Both constitutions protect individual rights, but the approach, well, it differs. The U.S. Constitution includes the Bill of Rights, which concentrates on civil liberties and limits government powers. The Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms explicitly enumerates rights, including equality rights, and provides a framework for interpreting these rights within the context of Canadian values. Additionally, the Charter allows for reasonable limits on rights in a manner that the U.S. Constitution does not explicitly endorse. The U.S. Supreme Court plays a crucial role in interpreting the Constitution, often making landmark decisions that shape American law and society. While the Supreme Court of Canada also interprets the Constitution, its approach can be more flexible and pragmatic, often considering the societal values and the context of rights in its rulings. Both countries operate under federal systems, but the distribution of powers differs. The U.S. Constitution explicitly delineates powers between the federal government and the states, whereas Canada's Constitution grants more residual powers to the federal government, reflecting its historical context and the need for a strong central authority. In summary, while both constitutions serve as essential frameworks for governing and protection of rights, they differ significantly in structure, amendment processes, the scope of rights, and judicial interpretation. These differences reflect the unique historical and cultural contexts of the United States and Canada.